Robin, thank you so much. And I have a little laryngitis, so I might go in and out, but I will try to continue wherever I left off. So I'm really, Becky, your story was amazing because you were that 6-year-old child with that mother that was just going to be on your side. The story I'm going to tell you is a little opposite, but we ended up in actually the same place. And I'm so grateful to hear your story. As you were telling it, I was reliving a little bit of my story because my mom was mentally challenged. And I didn't know that. No one knew that, but she was. And I grew up in a very abusive childhood. I was stabbed by my mother several times, and my mom was a nurse. And because she was a nurse, we would get sewn up at home. So my stitches were always put together by my mother, and no one knew any different. I was beaten with extension cords, webs. I was sexually abused by her boyfriend. It was an amazing experience. And the way I ran is because I ran to school. I knew the only option that I had was that when I was safe, I was at school. And so we knew that if we didn't get on a school bus and get home, that we were going to get beat. And so I took that chance every time to actually stay at school, preparing myself for the beating that I was going to get when I got home. Not knowing any different, I had no idea. I thought all kids got in trouble every time they came home late. It just was the norm. I'm a product of the projects of Cleveland, Ohio. Anybody have ever been to Cleveland, Ohio? Cleveland, Ohio was probably one of the most racially divided cities you can imagine. And in my generation of going through school, we were one of the first products of busing. And if you didn't know what busing was, it's when they took all the black kids and put them on a bus and moved them into the white neighborhood. But what they did is they took the white teachers from that school and moved them with the white students back to the black neighborhood. So the only thing they really did was actually just move our location. But the blessing that it gave me is that where I grew up, there wasn't any garages, there wasn't any school playgrounds or grass and play lots, but I saw it when we were bused. So when I was bused, I always sat at the window seat. For some reason, the window seat gave me comfort. A lot of the kids were being teased. I was probably one of the kids that had the hand-me-down clothes. Might not have had a bath because we probably got evicted every now and then where we didn't have access to a shower. And so looking and traveling that 30 miles to the west side and going to school gave me an opportunity to see something totally different. The bus would pick us up in Cleveland on the corner of the projects, and it was really a concrete village. I lived in a concrete village. And when we would go across the way on the freeway, we would enter into these neighborhoods where I saw first-time garages. I said, wow, people have cars and they have these long pads and they just put their cars in these little pads. And then I saw grass, and then you start seeing these little individual homes. And I used to say, well, one day I'm going to have that. I'm definitely going to have that. I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I don't know how they got it, but I definitely want to have it. And when we used to have recess, I used to sit and talk to the teachers and ask them questions about, well, how do you get a job? And they said, well, you're only 10 years old. Yeah, but how do I get a job? Well, you got to wait a little bit. Well, how do I get money? And how do I get this? My mom can't pay rent. We're going to get evicted. And they say, oh, no, your mom won't get evicted. You know, they'll have public assistance and you'll do X, Y, Z. And I remember sitting in the food line one time, and when I grew up, they gave us green tokens to actually segment you from the individuals that had money that could go through a separate food line. So in school, you had the little green token, and I forgot my token, and I couldn't eat that day. And I remember going up, and they had seen me every day. They knew that I had that green token every day, but this day I missed it. And I remember the lunch lady saying, don't you realize if you don't have your token, we can't tell who you are? I'm like, really? So a little green token is how you determine who I am. And that made me constantly, I have water with me, I do. That made me constantly think about, I did not want to be who I was. But I also knew that it had to be something better. And so as I got to the age of 14, I didn't have a dad in my life. My father was actually divorcing my mom when I was 1, so I have very little memory of him. But my mom got into a relationship that actually got me taken away from her legally. I ended up in juvenile home. And when I got put in juvenile home, I remember that a guy out of nowhere came and said that they wanted custody of me. And that's when I met my father. My father was a single male that was a postman coming out of the Army. He was a former boxer in the Army, but he was a mail handler at the post office at the main branch. And I remember I said, how did you know about us? He said, oh, your mother called me months ago wanting me to give her a gun to protect you guys out of this situation. And I told her the only way I would give her this gun is if I could see the kids. And he said, you don't remember me walking up to you and calling your name? I said, yeah, I remember that, but I thought you were a stalker or some crazy guy, and I wondered how you knew my name. He goes, no, I'm your father. So my dad actually sued for custody, and he won. He won a 14-year-old girl when he worked from 7 at night to 7 in the morning at the post office that was home alone, coming out of a very abused home and had already been sexually assaulted by the age of 12. So just imagine sitting yourself at home wondering, oh, what can I get myself into? I had every opportunity to do everything wrong. But one thing that I remember is that I always knew that there was a fork in the road. And the reason I knew that there was always opportunities is because of that school bus ride. The fork in the road every time I saw being bused was coming from a concrete village to an actual neighborhood where people had a community. And you would see people outside playing, ballparks, ball fields. I knew that there was always a fork. So sometimes I remember when my dad said, well, look, the only requirement you have here, because I know you don't know me, is to go to church on Sunday. You don't have to do anything else. I'm not going to force you to do anything else, but you definitely, and you have to call me and let me know you're in the house. I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went to school. I ended up, and I'm going to be very transparent here, I ended up taking some H&R Block tax courses at the age of 15, and I passed. They thought I was 18. So I was actually preparing taxes for H&R Block at the age of 15. I had a paycheck coming in from 6:30 at night till about 10 o'clock at night, and my father thought I was doing drugs and selling drugs, so then he called the police on me. He called the police, because he really did. He said, where are you getting this money from? And I said, well, I work. He goes, you know you don't work, you're damn lying. I know you're lying. There's nobody's hiring you. You're 15. I said, no, I got a job. He said, there's no way you can have a job. And so I couldn't explain taxes to him because he had no idea what the hell that meant. So I just pretty much said, okay, whatever. So I ended up back in juvenile home. And it came across a woman, a judge. And that judge was Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones. And she is deceased now, but she was one of my biggest mentors. And the reason why I remember sitting in front of her, and I had to spend 3 days in the juvenile home, and it was some crazies in there. I mean, there was some kids that truly I wouldn't want to get out either. I mean, but I knew I was just sitting in the corner with books. They would take my book and throw it across the room. They had these little shelves. I would go and try to do something in the shelves, and I found the little orderlies that were doing the cleaning. I would try to hang out with them because I was afraid of these other kids that looked like they could kick my butt anytime. And so I remember when I got in front of the judge, she says, what the hell are you doing here? You're the first almost straight A student I ever seen sitting in here. I said, well, my father thinks I'm selling drugs, but I'm really not. And I told her the story, and she thought I was lying too. So she called H&R Block. And they said, oh yeah, Miss Garrett comes here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And they said, do you know how old she is? I said, well, don't bust my game. I mean, you can't tell them how old I am. And she did. She lied. She told them how old I was. I said, well, if you give me 2 more months, I'll be 16. I could get a work permit. And they did. So, of course, they fired me. And then I waited 2 months, and I got a work permit, and I went back. But the blessing that I have is that young lady, that judge, went on to become a congresswoman. And what she did is that she never stopped following me. She didn't know what happened to my mom. And the one thing that I did omit is that the day my mom lost custody of me was very traumatic for me. The day my mom, the judge asked my mom, can you and your ex-husband figure out a way to do joint, custody? And my mom said, oh, hell no. He ain't been in her life. He ain't been here. I did all this work. It's all about me. And the judge just looked at her a little strange. My father is a very quiet, tiny guy. And so I can imagine my mom would bulldoze the hell out of him every 5 minutes that he could. And so he looked over and he said, is there anything you want to tell your ex-wife? He said, no. And he looked at me and they said, where do you want to go? And honestly, I said, I want to go back with my mother. The judge kind of looked at me strange. I said, I don't know him. I don't know this guy. I know her. I know I'm going to get my butt whooped, but I know her. I know to be prepared. I love my mother. He goes, young lady, I can't put you back there. He said, either you're going to go to juvenile home or you're going to go to your father, at least temporarily, and then I'll revisit this in a year. When he said that, my mother flipped the table over. She cursed every word that you possibly can. He hit the little gavel and said, you are now going with your dad. And my mom looked at me and she said, you know, you will never amount to shit. You will never be anything. I will never take you back or speak to you again until you broke, pregnant, and on welfare with a bunch of babies. And I looked at her and I was like, what? She said, you are dead to me at this point. I was 14, and I never forget my dad when I would come back home, and he was saying, well, what do you want to do? And I had siblings. I had a 7-year-old brother at that time. I had a sister that was 8 years older and a brother that was 6 years older. My brother that was 6 years older ran away. He couldn't take it anymore. He was really abused as well. My mom had cracked his head several times, stitched up his head. Definitely beat him with extension cord, anything she could grab with him because he was 6'2", so she had to reach when she had to come after him. And so he told her, I remember that one day before I actually left her house, he said, if you put your hands on me one more time, I probably will kill you. And he left the next day. He came in my room and said, can I borrow your bike? And I said, my bike is like for a little kid. You're like huge. He was like, yeah, I just want to borrow it. My brother left with that bike and he ran away, and I hadn't seen him for almost, at that time, fast forward to the 20s, almost 15 years. And so I'm here to tell you about empowerment. You know, I've been blessed in my journey. My mother was my biggest blessing. Even though she was probably my worst influence, she was my biggest blessing. She empowered me. She gave me the ability to make some decisions. She showed me what I did not want to be, and I don't even think she knew that. And I think she loved me because I can stand here before you and tell you I never heard in my 44 years, or at least the 14 that I spent with her, ever saying, I love you. That never came out of my mother's mouth. And we never had that ability to have that affection with others. But what I could say what my mom did is that I saw my mom's hustle. She tried her damnedest to make sure we had a roof over our head. I remember my mom cooking only the meal that she could feed her 4 kids and not eating for 3 to 5 days just to make sure we had something. I remember her taking us from bus station to bus station or restaurant to shower or try to wash us up before we have to go to school. I remember the hustle and the drive that she had, and that ability was just something that I knew. It wasn't that she couldn't do better. She was doing the best that she could. She was a nurse, but she was a nurse and didn't realize this until she died. My mom did pass away of lung cancer in 2012, and that was the first time my youngest sibling, my older sibling, ever called me. So 27 years had passed before they made a call to me to say, hey, I think you need to come and see your mother. Really? So I get all excited thinking that maybe this could be the reconciliation. They never told me she was dying. And when I got there, she was already in a coma. So there was no reason or ability to make that connection. But what I did talk to her about privately was that I loved her. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So one of the things I want to tell people, a lot of time people feel bleak or they don't understand that they have hope, or they don't understand that they have options. You always have the options. It's not even about age. It's not even about race, creed, or color. But what it is about women have the ability, the innate ability to make decisions that can affect everyone around them. And the one thing my mother did, she affected everyone around us. We're still a very dysfunctional sibling family. Not for the fact that I haven't tried to do the counseling, but a lot of people are angry. My brother and I were the only 2 out of the 4 of us that got abused. The other 2 siblings were treated with so much generosity and kindness. It was amazing. When my mom died, of course, they could not afford the funeral, so I paid for that. And when I paid for that funeral, it was amazing to see the people who came out for my mom and not recognizing my brother and I. They thought she had 2 kids and not 4. And my brother looked at me and he says, how do you stand here and accept this? I said, because if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't even be here today. And so I wouldn't have the blessings that I have today to bestow on people. I wouldn't be able to have a talk or a story to share with you. I have been very successful. My mother's words of "you won't amount to shit" was the best thing she could have ever said to me. And I have a book coming out, just that. It's named My Mother's Words, How the Most Negative Influence Was My Most Positive Motivator. And I think everyone in this room have to kind of look into the journey that they've had and actually understand that some of the worst things that can happen to you could be your best blessing. And that we ended up in the same place. But my road just took a couple little bumps and bruises on the other side. And those bruises, I wouldn't be who I am today. I am very fearless. My mom created a fearless kid. And the blessing that I had is when we cleaned out my mother's house, and I had not been to her house in 27 years, didn't know where she was at. I had since went back, and my father said, "You need to give back to the community of Cleveland." And I said, "Well, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it my way." So in 2006, I bought a building, and I bought a train station. And I said, "You know, Dad, if I'm coming back, I'm going to come back with a bang, because I hate Cleveland." And he goes, "Really?" I said, "You know, I hate Cleveland now. This is not going to be a good journey for you." So I did. I bought a train station. I blew the roof off the train station in downtown Cleveland, and I opened up something called 2020 Martini Cafe and Lounge, which was a jazz supper club, and it was when New Orleans meets Creole, and then it meets the Italian experience. And people go, "What the heck does that mean?" So if you ever seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, which I'm sure most people have, well, those set designers in Italy, I went and flew them into Cleveland, Ohio. And as I sold weapons, I was an arms seller. I right down the street over on Pacific Coast Highway. I was a foreign military sales officer, flew all over the world, had a great time. I was the only black chick in every room. It was just a great experience. And they always thought I was the student aide, so I didn't really have to do anything until everybody goes. I remember they would come into the room and they was like, "Oh, we need to set up for this person named Twyla Garrett." I said, "I am Twyla." They goes, "No, come on, just help us set up." I'm like, "Well, I am Twyla." So I had such a great experience, and really my career with the federal government is what's given me the discipline and the blessings to actually open up several businesses. But when I got into Cleveland, I remember flying them in, and I realized I knew nothing. I didn't speak Italian, and I was in some trouble. So I went to Cleveland State University and found a professor that could speak Italian and said, "I need you to get over here and try. I got to negotiate this deal with these people. I don't even know what the hell they're doing. I just know they can do all of these set designs." And so, but I did tell the director that came over, I said, "Before you leave, I want you to take an impression of the street." And this was the street that I had coffee on. Every time I had to come over here and do some type of deal with Italy, I want to bring that cobblestone street into my building. And they did. They brought in, and it was a magnificent, amazing experience. But my only catch was when it came to hiring. So the building ended up being about the whole project was about $2.3 million. It was self-funded. They wouldn't give us a loan. They thought I was a little crazy. I'd never been a restaurant entrepreneur before, so they say, "We're not giving you any money. You gotta be out of your damn mind." I said, "Okay, no problem, I'll show you." And so I went to the Project Empowerment, which is kind of the community to help people get jobs. And I remember going to Project Empowerment, and the mayor called me on my phone and said, Listen, we got all these people from Morton's and all of these other steakhouses. They're ready to do what you need to do. Just let me know when you're ready." I said, "No, I don't want them." He goes, "What do you mean you don't want them?" I said, "No, I'm going back to my neighborhood. I'm going to pitch a tent, and I'm going to hire 80 people out of the projects." He goes, "What?" He said, "You just spent $2 million to go have the project people manage your place?" I said, "Yeah, this is going to be a fun ride." And he goes, "Are you crazy?" I said, "No." I said, "I guarantee you, if you give people an opportunity and you let them know this is your opportunity, somebody's going to come up to the table and they're going to deliver." And so between my brother, who was the executive chef that I put through culinary school, we reunited after about 9 years, almost 15 years of separation, and then he never left me. So be careful about reuniting with family. They never leave you. My brother is still living in my house now. I'm trying to get him out of there. So just be very careful what you ask for. You might get it. So I didn't have kids, but I got a big one now. I got a big one. Can't get him out. But my brother was the executive chef. I did go to several restaurants. I dined around the city of Cleveland, and when I saw the best, waiter, and I saw the best maitre d', and I saw the best cooks, I went and asked them. I said, "Would you be part of my project team?" And they said, "Well, what's a project team? We don't have a job." I said, No, you have a job, but your job is going to be able to train these people that I'm about to bring in." And so when we pitched that tent, we had over 800 people apply. And the news covered it, and everybody covered it, and we had people that was crack addicted. 2 of the people we hired, we had to get them off of drugs and get them into apartments and hotels. We hired 87 people from the projects to run 2020. We put them through about a 2.5-month training. And when grand opening opened, you would be amazed to see who was running the show. And I remember when they said, well, what is your grand opening going to entail? I said, and Cleveland's being racist, every TV show tried to get me to say, well, this is only for African Americans. This is only for African Americans. And I said, no, this is not for African Americans. This is for everyone. I said, my biggest blessing is if I see prostitutes, doctors, lawyers, drug dealers, all in the same place. And they said, what? I remember the news reporter goes, are we live? And they said, yeah. I said, listen, I grew up with all of these rules and regulations of Cleveland. My place is not that. It's for all. And I want to make sure all came. So I was so happy when we opened our doors. There was the pimp Don Juan from Detroit. There was Ursuline College nuns, who I went to Ursuline College, so I had nuns in habits, and then I had nuns in plain clothes. They were all at the bar drinking wine. We had an amazing experience, and the thing was that that was the night that I can celebrate the most, where everybody came together. Angie Stone was on my stage, a good friend of mine who performed for us, and it was a night to remember. And I remember the mayor saying, I could never see that happening in Cleveland. He said it won't last, and it did last. And so right now, Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James are great friends and provided great support. So I tell this story because it's 3 things I want to leave you guys with. And I know that a lot of people don't realize it, but when you have a dream, you got to elevate that dream. And if you elevate that dream, you got to elevate love with that dream. You got to love everything you do, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I have more failed businesses than I have successful businesses, but my failed businesses help me make my other businesses multi-million-dollar businesses. So don't be afraid of failure. Failure is actually, myself and Magic Johnson was hosted at the Black Enterprise Awards, and we were on stage together, and I remember Magic saying, there's no such word as a failure. I said, yes, it is. What are you talking about? I said, you had Starbucks that was a failure, the movie theaters that was a failure. He looked at me like, Twyla. I said, but it was not your money you were spending. When you spend your own money, you count your failures. Magic Johnson was spending investors' money. He didn't count those as failures. But your failures can actually be the biggest blessing to your next level. So make sure you do that. So you got to love it. You got to own it. And once you own it and love it, the big thing about it is that you then have to elevate your life. And elevating your life is not about you, it's about everybody around you. So I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity for me to speak. I hope you got a message out of what I said today. And it's not about giving up. It's about elevating your life and empowering others. And if I can empower others to just do what you do and do it best, because when you do what you do and you do it best, the money will come, the fame will come if that's what you're seeking. But more importantly, your heart will be held and your heart will be whole. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you guys the rest of the day.